We've now covered all of the Reason instruments, but what we haven't done is spent a lot of time behind the back of the rack. There's so much that can be done by recabling the rack and by overriding the auto routing that Reason typically does. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of that in this video. We're adding a mixer and we're adding a Kong with the default kick. Now, Kong is pretty powerful, but what it doesn't have is a pattern generator like ReDrum has. Wouldn't it be cool to use ReDrum's patterns to control the Kong drum sounds? Well, of course we can. Let's add a ReDrum, but I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And if you recall, holding Shift down stops Reason from auto-routing. So if we flip the rack around, you'll see there are no cables with the ReDrum. In Reason, a gate is a trigger for a note to be played at its most basic level. So what we want to do is take the gate out from ReDrum and cable it to the gate in on Kong. So let's drag the gate out from channel 1 of the ReDrum to the gate in of pad 1 of the Kong. And we'll do the same for channel 2, 3, and 4. And we'll stop there for now. Now what that means is that every time I trigger a ReDrum channel, at least 1 to 4, it's going to send a signal to trigger the corresponding pad in Kong. So now we can build a pattern and play back Kong. Watch this. So that's the bass drum, but it's playing the Kong bass drum. Let's add a snare. Now a hi-hat. And finally an open hi-hat. Now if I go up to Kong and change my bass drum sound, of course the pattern will play the new bass drum. Let's change the snare. So that's pretty wild. I'm using the ReDrum pattern generator to play back the pads in my Kong. Now, wouldn't it be cool to send that snare drum sound from Kong to that very powerful effects section of Thor? Well, let's do that. So I added a Thor, but I did not stop the auto routing. It's cabled right to my mixer, but I'm going to rename it because I only want to use Thor as an effects unit for my snare drum. So we're going to call it Snare Effects. And then what I'm going to do is take my snare in Kong, and you see all these outputs on the back? Well, I'm going to send the snare to my output 3 and 4. And then I'm going to take output 3 and send it to Thor into the audio in 1. Now within Thor, I'm going to define a new modifier. We're going to take audio in 1, which is coming from that snare drum, and we're going to send it directly to filter 1 audio input. And we're going to send 100% of that signal right to filter 1. So let me turn off the oscillators in Thor. We're not generating sound from Thor. We're just taking it from the audio from the snare drum. Let's solo the snare drum, and I don't hear anything. And that's because we have to fool Thor into thinking it's getting some kind of signal. And once again, we'll use the gate to do that. So if we can send the gate out from the snare drum to the gate in of the Thor, we can fool Thor into thinking it's getting a signal, which it is, from the snare. But the only thing it's going to do then is send the output of the snare coming into audio input 1 into my filter. And there you hear it. Let's make sure it's working. We'll raise the sustain. Are we going through the filter? Yes, we certainly are. And now that I'm going through Thor's filter, I can really do just about anything with the Thor. Let me collapse this down. Actually, let me turn off solo first. Then we'll collapse all these down. And now in Thor, let's do some fooling around with the effects. We'll change it to a comb filter. And we're going through the whole chain in Thor. So anything in the chain we can change, like the delay. I can pan it to the right. And now let's add a second filter, this time a formant filter. But I'm not really hearing anything, am I? We're not sending it to the formant filter. We have to route the signal into the formant filter and then to the amplifier. That's pretty wild. Let's review what we've done. We started by taking the redrum and sending the signal from channels 1 to 4 to the gate in of Kong pads 1 to 4. And then our patterns played back in Kong. We sent the snare to output 3-4 and routed it to the audio in of Thor. We also made sure to take the gate out of pad 2 to fool Thor into thinking it's getting a signal by wiring it to the gate in of Thor. And then we set up another modulation source in Thor to take the audio in and send 100% of it to the filter within Thor. And then we could do just about anything we wanted to route the signal into the entire effects chain of Thor. So that's just a taste of all the fun you can have when you start recabling the rack and exploring the power of all these devices in Reason.